Welcome back to another edition of Animal General with me, your host, Dr. Mike Hutchinson. Today, I'm going to take the opportunity to get to some of your questions. And remember, if you have questions about any topic or something about your dog that you'd like me to talk about in a future podcast or videocast, please go to drmikehutchinson.com, D-R-M-I-K-E, Hutchinson.com, and there's a place there where you can ask your questions. So this first one was from Christina, and it says, my dog was diagnosed with a collapsing trachea when he was 5.5, and they said it was too early for him to have the surgery. Now he is 6.5. When do you think it is best time for him to have the surgery? Well, Christina, that depends on several factors. And when we don't usually go by age, we go by the degree. And for people listening, a collapsing trachea is when the windpipe starts to collapse, kind of like a collapsing straw. Trying to suck air through a collapsing straw isn't that pleasant, and it wouldn't be pleasant if your trachea was weakened for whatever reason. We think there might be hereditary factors for that. Small breed dogs, Pomeranians, Chihuahuas, sometimes toy poodles, Yorkies, oftentimes can have this condition. The trachea goes all the way down from the throat down into the chest. It can collapse in the chest. We call that a thoracic collapsing trachea, or in the neck, a cervical collapsing trachea. There are stents that they can put in that will expand that trachea and open it again. There's some surgeries they can do on the outside of the trachea to support it. But all in all, it depends on the degree of collapse. And some of the dogs we like to medically manage. In my career, is over 30 years as a veterinarian, I would say that over 95% of them are easily managed over time with medications. And that puts maybe less than 5% into perhaps a situation where surgery might be indicated. So I would follow your veterinarian's advice on that. I can't answer that. It's not based on age. Like I said, we have 4 degrees of a collapsing trachea, one being the least severe and 4 being extremely severe. And as you get close to 4, that's when they're ready for surgery. And age has no factor. It's no factor in my decisions as far as when I would recommend that. So thanks for the question, Christine. I hope that helped. So the second question is from Eric. It says, I have a Yorkie that is approximately 2 years of age and weighs around 13 pounds. He had 3 seizures in the last year. I'm sorry to hear that, Eric. And all 3 have been around 5 a.m. And the most recent was yesterday morning. Yesterday's seizure was the worst, lasting about 8 minutes. He lost bowel control. We are working with a doctor in our hometown. She is doing her due diligence to find a course of action. I'm seeking additional insight for a remedy to my little boy's illness. I would appreciate any advice that you could offer, and thank you. Well, Eric, on seizures, I used to be an ER doc for several years of my career, about 7.5 years, and I unfortunately saw an enormous amount of seizure animals, and because about 148 veterinarians or clinics were referring to that emergency clinic, I used to be paranoid, and I used to call the neurologist at the different universities. This was pre-internet, late 80s, early 90s. The internet was out there, but I didn't have it yet, and I used to call and ask advice to see if I was giving good advice. And when I hear a Yorkie, one of the first things that comes to my mind, and I'm sure it came to your doctor's mind, is a shunt, a hepatic shunt or a portal shunt. What that is that our blood gets detoxified in the liver, and so does the dog's. And sometimes there's a vessel. Think of the liver like a tree with all the branches going into it, all the vessels going into it. Well, once in a while, a branch will shunt around the liver, and it'll go back directly into the general circulation, into the heart, and then up to the brain. And if, say, ammonia isn't detoxified or the protein isn't broken down correctly, then they can end up with seizures. So we check for that by doing a bile acids test. Your veterinarian may have already done that. If she hasn't, that would be my number one suggestion, is to have a bile acids test. That's all you have to ask for, bile acids test. And that will diagnose or not diagnose that condition. Otherwise, we get into controlling seizures. Today, we don't have a cure for it. Stay tuned. There are a lot of universities working on that, and I think one will come. And we medicate when we have to try to keep the areas in the brain from teaching other areas in the brain to lower their electrical potential, if you will, and start seizuring more easily. So we do medicate those dogs if they get into a certain amount of seizures. Your veterinarian would be the best one to make that decision. I hope this helps. I think if you look for that portal shunt or that hepatic shunt, you'll find at least that information, and that would be where I would start. Thank you for that question. The next question is from Doreen. Doreen says, I have a 6-year-old Pomeranian mix who I adopted from a rescue, and since I got him about 2 years ago, he has had some issues with urination and defecation in the house. I was able to break him of that while I was home. However, when he's alone at night and during the day, it is a totally different story. I have him in the basement for this reason, so cleanup is easier for me, but it is becoming an issue. Of course that is. He is a very anxious dog when left alone, to the point where he will shake and pant heavily. How do I stop him from using the potty in the house when I'm not there to monitor him? Any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. So, Doreen, that's a difficult question, and there's two parts. One is that we can always start to retrain a dog to eliminate correctly outdoors, but we have to be there, of course. When we're not there, we have to crate them. We have to contain them so that they don't just use the house as the general potty ground. And when a dog has, say, separation anxiety, I don't know what your dog has exactly, but say it has separation anxiety, when you're gone, it's really nervous and anxious. It would be important for us to correctly diagnose that so we can approach that first by addressing that, maybe medically, and helping that separation anxiety while you're gone, and then going back into proper house training. Again, sometimes we have to do it 2 or 3 times in dogs. And believe me, old dogs can learn new tricks, so it is very easy to do as long as you have the time and do it correctly. We could direct you to do that again. But the best way to approach the situation that you have is with a correct diagnosis. It has to be diagnosed of what that behavioral issue is. If it's separation anxiety, we can address that. If it's something else, that can be addressed as well. So that's the best advice I can give you with that information. I hope that helps. And if you have a more specific question, just ask again, and I'll try to approach that in another session. Thank you for that question, Doreen. And the final question I have for today is from Alita. It says, I found a tick on my 5-month-old Labrador puppy this evening. We removed it and placed it in a container of alcohol. Good idea. What are some of the signs? I actually burn them or flush them. What are some of the signs that I should look for in the next few days to know if he has been affected by the tick? Also, what are some natural home remedies that I can spray on him to repel the ticks? Thank you, and I appreciate your response. Well, Lita, I have lots of advice about ticks because where I live in Western Pennsylvania, it's tick heaven, unfortunately. We actually find ticks on dogs year-round, even in the wintertime. Any day above 32 degrees, these ticks are coming out for a blood meal. It's a miserable problem in Western Pennsylvania, and one tick can carry several diseases. They can carry Lyme disease, they can carry ehrlichiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, anaplasmosis. There's so many diseases. They're disease-carrying experts, and I hate them. But to help you with your puppy, generally things like Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever don't show up in 3 days. So there's nothing I can tell you specifically in those 3 days. Since you preserve that tick, take it to your veterinarian. They can identify it for you, see if it's a deer tick, for instance, and know if there's a probability or a higher probability of Lyme disease, for instance. But there's nothing specifically I would do at this point except take it to your veterinarian and have it identified and watch the site where you removed it. It should just go away. It gets red and then it goes away. As far as for prevention, I like it. A 5-month-old puppy should be on monthly flea and tick control everywhere in the United States. And those are very simple products. You can ask your veterinarian what they recommend. I use NexGard in my dogs. I have Labradors too. And I have mutts, and I use NexGard in them, which is a chewable pill they get once a month. And then I use HeartGard for heartworm disease and roundworms and hookworms. And I give those monthly. Incredibly safe. They've been out for a long time, about 3 years. The NexGard is about 3 years. And we know that it's very, very effective in dogs. There are other products that your veterinarian might recommend. A natural thing, you can take Listerine, not the minty fresh. You want to get the original brown stuff. Fill a spray bottle about 9/10 of the way with Listerine, 1/10 the rest of the way with water, and then you can spray that onto their coat when you go outdoors, and that will help repel the ticks. You can also spray it on your clothing as well if you're taking a walk out in the woods, and it will help repel them off of us as well. I learned that from the search and rescue people. They use the products that I recommend, like NexGard, but when they go out into the woods, you're going to get ticks on you no matter what. So is your dog. So if you do spray that on when you go out, it's a great repellent, a natural trick. I have that on the website as well. I hope that helps. Thank you for your questions. Remember, don't just live and let live, but live and help live.